The dust kicked up in swirls around Eleanor's cane as she stepped down from the stagecoach into Abilene, Kansas. And the first thing she heard was laughter, sharp and cruel as a rattlesnake's bite. It was the summer of 1878, and the prairie heat bore down on her shoulders like a physical weight as she struggled to maintain her balance on the uneven ground. Her left leg, weakened by a childhood fever that had ravaged her body years ago, buckled slightly, and she gripped her carved oak cane tighter, feeling the familiar ache that never quite left her bones. "Look at that," a voice drawled from the saloon porch. "A cripple thinking she can make it out here in cattle country." Eleanor kept her chin high, though her cheeks burned. She had heard worse in Boston, where her wealthy aunt had raised her after her parents died. But out here, in this wild place where she had come to claim the small mercantile her late uncle had left her, the words still stung like prairie nettles against bare skin. She was 23 years old, and she had spent her entire life being told what she could not do, where she did not belong, how she would never find a man who could see past her affliction. The boarding house was 3 buildings down, and she made her way there slowly, methodically, ignoring the stares that followed her progress. Her dark hair was already escaping from its pins in the heat, and her traveling dress was coated in a fine layer of dust. She focused on the rhythm of her movement, the tap of her cane against the wooden boardwalk, the drag of her left foot, the solid plant of her right. It was a pattern she had perfected over 18 years, since the fever had taken her when she was 5. The boarding house proprietress, a stout woman named Mrs. Harriet Cole, greeted her with surprising warmth. "You must be Miss Eleanor Winters. Your uncle spoke of you often before he passed, said you had more spirit than half the men in this town combined." Eleanor felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "He was always kind to me in his letters. I only wish I could have arrived before he died." "Consumption took him quick," Mrs. Cole said, leading Eleanor up a narrow staircase. She moved slowly, without comment, allowing Eleanor to navigate the steps at her own pace. "But he made sure everything was in order for you. The mercantile is yours, free and clear. The lawyer has all the papers ready." The room was small but clean, with a window overlooking the main street. Eleanor could see the bustle of the cattle town below, the cowboys riding in from the trails, the merchants hawking their wares, the painted ladies calling from the saloon balconies. It was rougher than Boston, rower, but there was an energy here that made her blood quicken despite her exhaustion. She spent the next 3 days meeting with the lawyer, a nervous man named Thornton who kept adjusting his spectacles and taking inventory of the mercantile. The store was well-stocked with dry goods, tools, fabric, and supplies that the ranchers and townspeople needed. Her uncle had built a solid business, and Eleanor discovered she had a natural head for numbers and inventory. The work was hard, requiring long hours on her feet, but she was determined to prove herself. The mockery, however, did not stop. When she opened the store for business on her 4th day in Abilene, a group of young cowboys lounged outside, making comments loud enough for her to hear. "Bet she drops half the merchandise trying to carry it. How's a lame woman going to handle this kind of work? Give it a month before she sells out and runs back east." Eleanor served her customers with a steady hand and a polite smile, even as their words burrowed under her skin. She measured out flour and sugar, cut lengths of fabric, and tallied accounts with meticulous care. Most of the townspeople were kind enough, though she caught the pitying looks, the way they watched her move as if expecting her to fall at any moment. It was on a Saturday evening, 2 weeks after her arrival, that everything changed. The town was holding a dance in the large barn at the edge of town, a celebration for the end of a successful cattle drive. Mrs. Cole had encouraged Eleanor to attend, but she had refused at first, knowing from bitter experience that dances were places of humiliation for women like her. She had spent too many evenings sitting along the wall while other girls whirled across the floor, too many moments watching potential suitors turn away when they noticed her cane. But Mrs. Cole was insistent. You need to be part of this community, dear. You cannot hide away in your shop forever. So Eleanor found herself in the barn that evening, wearing her best dress of deep blue calico, her hair pinned up carefully, her cane a solid presence at her side. The barn was transformed with lanterns hanging from the rafters, and a fiddle band was already playing a lively tune. The air smelled of hay and perfume and the whiskey being passed around in flasks. She found a seat on a bench near the wall, settling in to watch the festivities. Couples spun across the floor, their laughter rising above the music. Eleanor tried to ignore the familiar ache in her chest, the longing for something she had convinced herself she could never have. "That is quite a fine cane you have there," a voice said beside her. She turned to find a man standing there, hat in his hands. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking shade of blue-green, like the rivers she had read about in books, and there was something in his expression that was neither pity nor mockery but genuine interest. "It was my grandfather's," she said carefully. "Oak carved in Pennsylvania." "I am Cole Davidson," he said. "I run a ranch about 10 miles north of town, just brought in a herd, and my men tell me they have been shopping at your store. They say you are fair and honest, which is more than could be said for your uncle, though I hate to speak ill of the dead." Eleanor blinked. "My uncle was not honest. He had a tendency to adjust his scales when he thought folks were not looking," Cole said with a slight smile. "But that is not why I came over here. I came to ask if you would do me the honor of a dance." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to dance with me?" "I surely do," he said, and his voice was warm, sincere. "Unless you have objections to dancing with a cowboy who still has trail dust in his hair." "I cannot dance," she said flatly. "In case you have not noticed, I have a limp and I require a cane to walk. I would only make a fool of both of us." Cole tilted his head, studying her. "Miss Winters, I have broken 3 horses this month, mended more fence than I can count, and pulled a calf out of a mud bog in the middle of a thunderstorm. I reckon if I can do all that, I can figure out how to dance with a graceful woman who happens to use a cane." Graceful. The word hung in the air between them. No one had ever called her graceful. Pitiable, yes. Unfortunate, certainly. Brave, occasionally, in that condescending way that made her want to throw things, but never graceful. "I do not understand," she said quietly. "Why would you want to dance with me when there are a dozen other women here who could actually dance properly?" Cole sat down beside her on the bench, setting his hat on his knee. "Can I tell you something, Miss Winters? When I was 16, I got thrown from a horse and broke my back. The doctor said I would never walk again. Spent 6 months flat on my back learning what it meant to be helpless. But I was stubborn, and I worked every day to get my strength back. It took 2 years before I could ride again, and even now, when a storm is coming, my back aches something fierce. So when I see someone who has clearly fought their own battles and refuses to give up, I reckon that is someone worth knowing." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I have never danced before, not really. A few times with my uncle at home, but never in public." "Then we will make this a first to remember," Cole said, standing and offering his hand. "And I promise you, Miss Winters, if anyone has anything unkind to say about it, they will answer to me." She looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, and then up at his face. There was no pity there, only a quiet determination and something else, something that made her heart beat faster. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand in his. Cole helped her to her feet, and she gripped her cane with her other hand. He led her to the edge of the dance floor, not the center where they would be the focus of all eyes, but to a spot where there was more space and less scrutiny. The fiddlers had struck up a slower waltz, and Cole positioned himself carefully in front of her. "Put your cane in your left hand," he said softly, "and give me your right. I will hold you steady." She did as he instructed, her heart hammering. His hand was warm and solid against hers, and when he placed his other hand gently on her waist, she felt the strength in him, the quiet assurance that he would not let her fall. We will take it slow, he said. Just follow my lead. If you need to stop, you say so and we will stop, no shame in it. They began to move and Eleanor felt clumsy at first, her leg dragging, her balance uncertain. But Cole was patient, adjusting his steps to match hers, holding her firmly but not tightly. He guided her in a simple pattern, nothing fancy, just a gentle sway and turn that accommodated her limitations. You are doing beautifully, he murmured. See, graceful as a swan. She nearly stumbled at his words, but he caught her easily, keeping her upright. Around them, she was aware of people stopping to watch, but for once she did not care. For the first time in her life, she was dancing, really dancing, and the man holding her was looking at her as if she was the only woman in the room. Why are you being so kind to me? She whispered. Because kindness costs nothing, he said simply. And because from what I have seen of you these past 2 weeks, you deserve a hell of a lot more kindness than this town has been giving you. You have been watching me. A slight flush crept up his neck. I have been in your store 3 times. Bought things I did not particularly need, just to have an excuse to talk to you. You probably do not remember me, I was not as cleaned up as I am tonight. She did remember, she realized. The tall cowboy who had bought rope and nails, who had complimented her organization of the store, who had tipped his hat to her with a smile that had made her stomach flutter. She had assumed he was just being polite. I remember, she said. You told me the store looked better than it ever had. Because it does, he said. You have a good eye, Miss Winters, and a good head on your shoulders. This town is lucky to have you, even if they are too foolish to realize it yet. The dance ended, but Cole did not immediately release her. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her, and something passed between them, unspoken but powerful. Then he stepped back, and she felt the loss of his warmth immediately. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. That was the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me. It was my genuine pleasure, he said. And if you are willing, I would like to call on you properly. Take you to dinner, maybe go for a ride if you would like. I have a wagon with a comfortable seat. Before she could answer, a harsh voice cut through the air. Well, if that is not the saddest thing I have ever seen. Eleanor turned to see a man she recognized, one of the cowboys who had been making cruel comments since her arrival. He was drunk, swaying slightly, with a mean glint in his eyes. A cripple and a cowboy playing at dancing, the man sneered. What is next, Davidson? You going to take her on cattle drives? Maybe she can hobble along behind the herd. Cole's expression went very still, very cold. He moved in front of Eleanor, placing himself between her and the drunk. You need to walk away, Peters, right now. Or what? Peters said, puffing up his chest. You going to defend the honor of a lame woman? She should have stayed back east where she belongs, not coming out here pretending she can run a business. I said walk away, Cole repeated, and there was steel in his voice now. Peters made the mistake of reaching out as if to shove Cole. What happened next was so fast, Eleanor barely saw it. Cole caught the man's arm, twisted, and had Peters on his knees in seconds. The cowboy's face contorted in pain. You are going to apologize to Miss Winters, Cole said, his voice dangerously quiet. And then you are going to leave this dance and think real hard about whether you want to keep your job on the Circle H ranch, because I happen to know the foreman, and he does not take kindly to men who disrespect women. I am sorry, Peters gasped out, his face red. I am sorry, Miss Winters. Cole released him, and Peters scrambled away, disappearing into the crowd. The music had stopped, and everyone was staring. Eleanor felt her face burn with embarrassment, but then Cole turned back to her, his expression softening. I apologize for the scene, he said, but I meant what I said. No one talks to you like that, not while I am around. Mrs. Cole appeared at Eleanor's elbow, her face concerned. Are you all right, dear? I am fine, Eleanor said, though she was shaking. I think perhaps I should go back to the boarding house. I will walk you, Cole said immediately. They left the barn together, stepping out into the cool night air. The stars were brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. Eleanor's leg was aching from the dancing, but she barely noticed. Her mind was spinning with everything that had happened. They walked slowly down the main street, which was quieter now with most folks at the dance. The only sounds were the distant music from the barn and the occasional bark of a dog. "I am sorry you had to witness that," Eleanor said finally. "I am used to comments like that, but I hate that you were put in a position of having to defend me." "I was not put in any position," Cole said firmly. "I chose to defend you because what he said was wrong, and because I cannot stand by and watch someone be cruel to a person I admire." "You admire me?" She stopped walking, turning to look at him in the dim light from the saloon windows. "I do," he said simply. "You came out here alone to a rough town where you knew no one to claim a business and make a life for yourself. You work hard every day despite the pain I can see you are in sometimes. You hold your head high even when people are cruel. That takes more courage than most folks will ever have, Miss Winters." "Eleanor," she said softly. "Please call me Eleanor." "Eleanor," he repeated, and the way he said her name made her shiver. "Will you let me call on you? I meant what I said about wanting to know you better." "Why?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her chest since he first asked her to dance. "Cole, I need to understand, is this pity?" "Because I have had enough of that to last a lifetime." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "When I saw you step off that stagecoach 2 weeks ago, the first thing I noticed was not your limp or your cane. It was the way you held yourself, proud and determined, even when those idiots on the saloon porch were laughing. I saw a woman who was not going to let anything break her spirit. And then I saw you in the store working so hard, being patient with difficult customers, organizing everything with such care. I saw someone who was strong and capable and kind. That is what I saw, Eleanor. That is what I still see." Tears were running down her face now, and she did not bother to hide them. "No one has ever seen me that way before." "Then they were all fools," he said gently. He reached out and carefully wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You are remarkable, Eleanor Winters. And if you will let me, I would very much like the chance to prove to you just how remarkable you are." She found herself nodding, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Cole smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his entire face. "Can I take you to dinner tomorrow evening?" he asked. "There is a restaurant at the hotel that serves a decent steak." "I would like that," she managed to say. He walked her the rest of the way to the boarding house, and when they reached the door, he took her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Until tomorrow, Eleanor." "Sleep well." She watched him walk away, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness, and for the first time since her childhood fever had stolen her strength, Eleanor felt something like hope blooming in her chest. The next evening, Cole arrived promptly at 6, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. Eleanor had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a dress of soft green cotton that Mrs. Cole had helped her press. Her hands shook slightly as she pinned her hair, and she had to force herself to breathe slowly. Dinner was wonderful. Cole was easy to talk to, asking her questions about her life in Boston, her family, her dreams for the mercantile. He told her about his ranch, how he had started with nothing and built it up over 8 years of hard work. He talked about his horses with obvious affection and about the challenges of ranching in Kansas where the weather could turn on a dime. "I always wanted to have my own place," he said, cutting into his steak. "Somewhere I could build something permanent. I grew up moving from town to town, my father chasing one failed opportunity after another. I swore when I was old enough I would put down roots and never move again." "Is your family still in Kansas?" Eleanor asked. A shadow crossed his face. "My parents died of cholera when I was 19. It was just me and my younger sister, but she married a good man in Missouri and has 3 children now. I visit when I can." "I am sorry," Eleanor said. "About your parents?" "Life is hard out here," he said. "But it is also beautiful in ways that nowhere else can match. Wait until you see a prairie sunrise or a field of wildflowers stretching to the horizon. It gets in your blood." Over the next few weeks, Cole became a fixture in Eleanor's life. He came to the mercantile almost every day, sometimes to buy supplies, sometimes just to talk. He helped her move heavy inventory, carry things from the storeroom, and deal with difficult customers. When he was there, the mockery from the townspeople seemed to diminish, as if Cole's obvious respect for her gave others permission to see her differently. He took her on drives in his wagon, out to places where the prairie opened up in vast golden waves. He showed her his ranch, a well-kept spread with a sturdy house and good outbuildings. His horses were beautiful, and he introduced her to each one by name, telling her their personalities and quirks. "This is Dusty," he said, stroking the nose of a gray mare. "She's getting older now, but she is the gentlest horse I have ever known. Would you like to try sitting on her, just sitting, nothing more?" Eleanor had not been on a horse since before her illness. The idea terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I do not know if I can." "I will be right here," Cole said. "I will not let you fall." With his help, she managed to get into the saddle, her bad leg supported by a stirrup that Cole adjusted carefully. The view from horseback was different, higher, and she felt a rush of exhilaration. "How does it feel?" Cole asked, his hand steadying her leg. "Like flying," she whispered. He smiled up at her, and in that moment, Eleanor realized she was falling in love with him. It was not just his kindness or his protection, though she valued those things. It was the way he saw her as whole, not broken. The way he challenged her to try new things without pushing too hard. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words mattered to him, but doubt still gnawed at her. Why would a man like Cole, strong and capable and handsome, want a woman who could not even walk without assistance? Surely he would eventually realize he could do better. Find someone who could ride beside him, dance without difficulty, bear him strong children without the worry that her weakness might be passed on. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the boarding house watching the sunset, she voiced her fears. "Cole, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Always," he said, turning to face her. "This thing between us," she said, gesturing vaguely. "Whatever it is. Are you certain this is what you want? Because I cannot help but think that eventually you will wake up and realize that you have tied yourself to a woman who will always be limited. I cannot run a ranch the way a proper ranch wife should. I cannot ride out to check fences or help with roundups. I will slow you down." Cole was quiet for a long moment, and Eleanor felt her heart sink, certain she had voiced the very doubts he had been too kind to express. "Eleanor," he said finally, "do you remember that first night when we danced?" "Of course." "Do you know what I was thinking the whole time?" She shook her head. "I was thinking that I had never held anyone so graceful in my arms, and I know you think I was just being kind, but I meant it. You move through the world with a determination and a dignity that takes my breath away. Every single day you face challenges that most people cannot even imagine, and you do it with courage and grace. That is not weakness, Eleanor, that is strength." "But practically speaking," he interrupted gently, "I have ranch hands to check fences and help with roundups. What I need is a partner, someone to share my life with, to talk to at the end of a long day, to build a future with. I need someone smart and capable, someone who can manage accounts and make decisions, someone who sees the world clearly and does not let hardship break her spirit." "I need you, Eleanor. You cannot possibly mean that. I have never been more serious about anything in my life." He took her hands in his. "I am not a man who says things I do not mean. When I look at you, I see the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. And yes, that means I see your cane and your limp, but I also see your strength and your kindness and your sharp mind and your beautiful smile. I see all of you, Eleanor, and I love all of you." The words hung in the air between them. "Love," he had said, "love. You love me," she whispered. "I love you," he confirmed. "I have loved you since that first dance, maybe even before, and I know it is soon, and I know you might need time, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I want to marry you, Eleanor. I want to build a life with you." Eleanor felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. Everything she had ever believed about herself, about what she could expect from life, was being rewritten in this moment. I love you too, she said, the words tumbling out. I have been so afraid to believe this was real, so afraid you would change your mind, but I love you, Cole. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see me. I love the way you make me feel like I can do anything. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she buried her face in his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Then marry me, he said into her hair. Say yes, and let me spend the rest of my life showing you how loved you are. Yes, she said, pulling back to look into his eyes. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. It was Eleanor's first real kiss, and it was everything she had dreamed of and more. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. How soon? He asked. How soon can we arrange it? There is a preacher in town. We could be married by the end of the week if you are willing. I am willing, she said, and laughed at the absurdity and the wonder of it all. They were married 5 days later in the small church on the edge of town. Mrs. Cole stood up as Eleanor's witness, and Cole's foreman, a grizzled man named Tom, stood up as his. Eleanor wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Cole had helped her sew, and Cole wore his best suit. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her in front of God and the small congregation with a tenderness that made Eleanor's heart soar. The town's attitude toward her had shifted noticeably since Cole had made his intentions clear. The same people who had mocked her now congratulated her. And while Eleanor suspected that much of their newfound respect had more to do with Cole's standing in the community than with any real change of heart, she was grateful for the peace it brought. Cole moved into the rooms above the mercantile with her, and they settled into married life with surprising ease. He helped in the store when he was not out at the ranch, and Eleanor discovered she had a talent for ordering and managing inventory that made the business more profitable than it had ever been under her uncle's management. But more than the practical arrangements, it was the emotional intimacy that surprised and delighted her. Cole was an attentive husband in every way. He brought her coffee in the morning and rubbed her aching leg in the evenings. He told her about his day and listened with genuine interest when she told him about hers. He made her laugh with stories about stubborn cattle and skittish horses. And at night, when they lay together in their bed, he showed her with his body what he had already shown her with his words, that she was beautiful and desired and loved exactly as she was. You are thinking too hard, Cole murmured one night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. I can practically hear your mind working. I am just happy, Eleanor said. So happy it frightens me sometimes. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing is going to go wrong, he said firmly. I am not going anywhere and neither are you. We are building a life together, Eleanor. And yes, there will be challenges, but we will face them together. Together, she repeated, liking the sound of the word. 6 months into their marriage, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. Her leg had been damaged by a childhood illness, but the doctors in Boston had never suggested she could not have children. Still, pregnancy would be hard on her body, and she worried about how she would manage. Cole was ecstatic and immediately overprotective. He wanted her to stop working in the store, to rest constantly, to let him carry her up and down the stairs. Eleanor had to firmly but lovingly explain that she was pregnant, not dying, and that she needed to remain active. I will not break, she told him one evening when he tried to stop her from lifting a bolt of fabric. I have been managing my limitations my entire life. I know what I can and cannot do. I just worry, he said, running a hand through his hair. You mean everything to me, Eleanor. If something happened to you, nothing is going to happen to me, she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. We are both strong. We are going to be fine. The pregnancy was difficult. Her leg ached more than usual, and there were days when simply standing was agony. But Eleanor was determined to prove that she could do this, that she could be a mother despite her physical limitations. Cole hired a young woman named Sarah to help in the store, giving Eleanor the ability to rest when she needed to without closing the business. Dr. Matthews, the town physician, monitored her carefully. He was a practical man who did not coddle her, which Eleanor appreciated. "You are healthy aside from your leg," he told her. "There is no reason to think you cannot deliver a healthy baby, but you will need to be careful and listen to your body." As her belly grew, so did the whispers in town. Some people expressed concern, others were openly skeptical that a crippled woman could successfully bear and raise a child. Eleanor tried to ignore them, but the comments stung, especially when she was tired and uncomfortable. "Let them talk," Cole said fiercely. "You are going to be an amazing mother. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool." Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1880 after a long and difficult labor. Dr. Matthews and Mrs. Cole were there, and Cole held Eleanor's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and love. When the baby finally emerged, wailing and healthy, Eleanor wept with relief and joy. "He is perfect," Cole said, his own eyes wet with tears. "Eleanor, you did it. He is perfect." They named him James, after Eleanor's father, and he was indeed perfect. A healthy, robust baby with Cole's dark hair and Eleanor's gray eyes. Eleanor discovered that motherhood, while exhausting, came naturally to her. She learned to nurse sitting down, to manage the baby while using her cane, to ask for help when she needed it without feeling like a failure. Cole was a devoted father. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with James when he was fussy, and sang off-key lullabies that made Eleanor laugh. The ranch continued to prosper under his management, and the mercantile did well under Eleanor's direction, especially with Sarah's help. When James was 6 months old, Eleanor finally felt brave enough to take him on a visit to Cole's ranch. She had been there several times during her pregnancy, but always briefly. Now, with the baby in her arms, she saw it with new eyes, as the place where her son might grow up, where he might learn to ride horses and work cattle alongside his father. "What do you think about moving out here?" Cole asked as they stood on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the prairie. James was asleep in Eleanor's arms, a warm weight against her chest. "Could we manage it?" Eleanor asked. "The store is in town." "Sarah has been doing most of the work anyway," Cole pointed out. "We could make her a partner, let her run the day-to-day operations while you handle the ordering and accounts from here. We could go into town a few times a week. The ride is not that far." Eleanor considered it. The ranch house was larger than their rooms above the store, with space for James to grow, for more children if they were blessed with them. The main floor was all on one level, which would be easier for her to navigate than stairs. And there was something appealing about being away from the constant scrutiny of town, about raising her family in this wild, beautiful place. "I think I would like that," she said. "I think I would like that very much." They made the move that fall, once the summer heat had broken. The transition was smoother than Eleanor had anticipated. Sarah was thrilled to become a partner in the mercantile, and she proved more than capable of running it with Eleanor's guidance. Cole hired a man to help Sarah with the heavy lifting, and Eleanor settled into a routine of driving into town twice a week to handle accounts and ordering. Life on the ranch was different from life in town, but Eleanor found she loved it. She loved the space and the quiet, the way she could sit on the porch and see nothing but prairie for miles. She loved watching Cole work with his horses, loved seeing James grow strong and curious. Her legs still ached, especially in cold weather, and there were days when she could barely walk. But Cole had built her a comfortable chair on the porch where she could sit and watch the world, and he never made her feel guilty for needing to rest. 2 years after James was born, Eleanor delivered a daughter. The labor was easier this time, and little Margaret, named after Cole's mother, was a calm baby who rarely fussed. James adored his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and Cole was even more besotted than he had been with his son. "Two perfect children," he said, holding Margaret while James climbed onto Eleanor's lap. "How did I get so lucky?" We both got lucky, Eleanor said, kissing James's dark curls. I never imagined I could have this. A husband who loves me, children, a home. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. You deserve all of it and more, Cole said. You are the strongest woman I know, Eleanor Davidson, and you are teaching our children to see strength in all its forms, not just the obvious ones. As the years passed, their family grew and thrived. James grew into a boy who was equally comfortable with books and horses, who had his father's kindness and his mother's sharp mind. Margaret was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a stubborn determination that reminded Cole of Eleanor when she had first stepped off that stagecoach. When James was 7 and Margaret was 5, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was more confident, more assured in her ability to manage. The pregnancy was her easiest yet, and she delivered another son, Samuel, on a warm spring morning. Cole joked that they were building their own ranch crew, and Eleanor laughed and told him 3 was quite enough. The children grew up knowing their mother used a cane, knowing that some days she hurt more than others, but never seeing it as a limitation. Eleanor taught them all to read and figure, preparing them for school in town. She managed the accounts for both the ranch and the mercantile, proving to have a head for business that made both enterprises prosperous. And she did it all while navigating a world that was not built for someone with her challenges, while proving every single day that disability did not mean inability. The town's attitude toward her had completely changed over the years. People who had once mocked her now came to her for advice about business and child rearing. Young women sought her out, asking how she managed, how she found the courage to claim a life she wanted rather than accepting what others expected of her. Eleanor always told them the same thing, that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. On their 10th anniversary, Cole took Eleanor back to the barn where they had first danced. It had been renovated over the years, but it was still used for town gatherings. This time they were there for a harvest celebration, and when the music started, Cole offered her his hand just as he had a decade before. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Davidson?" Eleanor smiled and took his hand, gripping her cane with the other. They moved onto the floor, and this time, no one stared with pity or mockery. Instead, people smiled and made room for them, respecting the couple who had proven that love and determination could overcome any obstacle. As they swayed to the music, Cole leaned down and whispered, "You are still the most graceful woman I have ever held." "And you are still the most wonderful man I have ever known," Eleanor whispered back. They danced until the music ended, and then they danced to another song and another. Their children watched from the sidelines, James holding Margaret's hand while little Samuel sat on Mrs. Cole's lap. The lanterns cast a warm glow over everything, and outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. 20 years after Eleanor had first stepped off the stagecoach in Abilene, she stood on the porch of her ranch house watching the sunset. Her hair was now streaked with silver, and her limp was more pronounced after a long day, but her eyes were bright, and her smile was genuine. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about how far we have come," she said. About how that girl who stepped off the stagecoach, expecting nothing but hardship and loneliness, could never have imagined this life. Their 3 children were grown now. James ran the ranch with his father, married to a kind woman named Catherine who did not mind that her mother-in-law needed a cane. Margaret had married the schoolteacher and lived in town, teaching alongside her husband and running the mercantile, which Sarah had eventually sold back to the family. Samuel was studying law in Kansas City, determined to make a difference in the world. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were special," Cole said. "I just had to make you believe it too." "You did more than that," Eleanor said, turning in his arms to face him. "You showed me that being different did not mean being less. You gave me the courage to claim the life I wanted. You loved me exactly as I was, and that made all the difference." "You were always brave," Cole said. I just gave you a safe place to be brave." They stood there together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed, and closer by, horses whinnied in their corral. Eleanor thought back to that first dance, to the way Cole had called her graceful when the rest of the world saw only her limp. He had seen past her cane to the woman beneath, had valued her strength rather than pitying her weakness. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible, the freedom to be fully herself. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Cole said, kissing her gently. "Always have, always will. You are my graceful dancer, Eleanor, my partner in all things, and I am the luckiest man alive to call you mine." As darkness fell over the prairie, they went inside together, walking slowly to accommodate Eleanor's pace. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of a life well lived. Photographs of their children, books lining the shelves, comfortable furniture worn smooth with use. In the kitchen, there was still a pot of coffee on the stove, and they sat together at the table, talking about their day, making plans for tomorrow, being together in the comfortable silence that came from decades of shared life. Eleanor looked at her husband across the table, at the silver threading through his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes that came from years of squinting into the sun and smiling. He was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, still the kindest, still the one who made her heart race when he looked at her with love in his eyes. "What would you say to another dance?" Cole asked suddenly, standing and offering his hand. "Right here, right now, with no music but the wind outside." Eleanor laughed and took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. She leaned her cane against the table and put both arms around his neck, and he held her close, supporting her weight effortlessly. They swayed together in the kitchen of their home, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. "Graceful," Cole murmured against her hair. "Always so graceful." And in that moment, held in the arms of the man who had seen her truly from the very beginning, who had called her graceful when the world called her crippled, who had loved her without reservation or condition, Eleanor finally and completely believed him. She was graceful, not despite her limp and her cane, but because she had lived her life with courage and dignity and love. She was graceful because she had refused to let the world's limitations become her own. She was graceful because she had found someone who saw her strength and celebrated it. They danced in their kitchen as the moon rose over the prairie. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together that was richer and fuller than either could have imagined. And when they finally stopped swaying and Cole helped Eleanor back to her chair, when they sat together in the gentle darkness and held hands like the young couple they had once been, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happy ending. The story of the girl with the limp and the cane who was mocked when she arrived in a dusty cattle town had become the story of a woman who had claimed her place in the world, who had loved and been loved, who had raised children and built businesses and proven that grace had nothing to do with the way a person walked and everything to do with the way they lived. And it had all started with a cowboy who had asked her to dance and called her graceful, who had seen past the surface to the remarkable woman beneath. As Eleanor drifted off to sleep that night, Cole's arm around her, she smiled. Her leg ached as it always did, her cane rested beside the bed as it always would, but her heart was full. She had lived the life she wanted, loved the man she chose, and created a legacy that would outlast her physical limitations. She had danced, truly danced, in all the ways that mattered. And she had been graceful always.